Okay, thank you.
Share my
I'd like
screen.
to call a meeting to order at 7 p.m. We're having the meeting on Zoom due to an abundance of caution over the pandemic. I believe because we're doing it on Zoom, we need to have a record of the attendance. Um, Terry, can you take the attendance for the record?
I certainly can, President Ziegler. Manager Crafton,
Here.
Manager Duval,
Here.
Manager Cook,
Present.
Manager Pedersen,
Here.
President Ziegler.
Present.
All managers are present.
Okay, and obviously Administrator Jeffrey is here, and from Bar Engineering, Scott Sobiak.
And Michael Welch is here for Smith Partners tonight.
Okay, good. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I see you have that showing. Is there any motions regarding this matter?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
I move that we adopt the agenda as proposed.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote? Administrator Jeffrey?
Yes. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
and President Ziegler.
Yes.
It's 5-0.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the update on the Ecosystem Health Action Plan. Administrator Jeffrey, are you the speaker for that?
Yes, yeah, I'll be speaking on this, President Ziegler. Thank you. President Ziegler, managers. Today we held the second workshop of 4 planned workshops for the Ecosystem Health Action Plan. Just a little reminder, this action plan came out of the realization, and really it came out of some recent permit applications that were put forward on marginalized land, and realizing that we're barely treading water, and that perhaps an entire shift in paradigm needs to happen, and really start looking at the ecosystem as a whole and how that impacts water quality. So what I'd like to do tonight is just run through what we did in the first workshop, some of the results that we found, and talk about the upcoming workshops that are going. Manager Crafton, I apologize. This will be a little bit repetitious for you, but
Not a problem.
all right. So on May 18th, we held our first workshop, and that workshop was really working with, we had really good attendance. We had every city with the exception of Deep Haven was represented, as well as the Board of Water and Soil Resources, the Department of Natural Resources, the Carver County Soil and Water Conservation District was present, and we had a representative from 9 Mile Creek Watershed District present. This focus was really to get the planners into the room. Prior to this, we'd always worked with engineers and the Public Works Department, but really if we want to do a planning exercise, best to align our plans with theirs and see if we can't get everybody on the same page. So the first workshop is really just talking. We worked in small groups, rotated around, and talked about, what is a healthy urban ecosystem, and then we discussed what are the challenges to creating a healthy urban ecosystem, and I'll go into that in a little more detail coming up. So today's work session, we talked about what are organizations currently doing to achieve those healthy ecosystems, and then more importantly, what aren't they doing? What gaps exist? Where can we start working to fill in on that? Workshop 3, we will start actually diving into those gaps in protection and identifying places where we can be most effective and efficient with our resources, to accomplish that, to fill in those gaps. And then workshop 4 will really be, where do we overlap? Where can we work together to create synergy? How do we address this as a team? Because we need to look beyond just our immediate vicinity. So again, back to this ecosystems health action plan, kind of putting it into more of a visual sense. You know, we can divide the watershed into 3 colors: the green, gray, and blue. Green being lawns, woodlands, agriculture, etc. Gray being the obvious hardscape, roads, streets, buildings, parking lots, and then blue being ultimately what we're trying to protect under 103B and 103D, the water resources. But green, you know, depending on who you talk to, all green is not created equal. For instance, cities in their ordinance say you must have a green space, and that green space could be, you know, nothing but you know, some varieties of shrubs or a certain number of tree plantings. They could be ornamental trees or whatever. A lawn is not equivalent to a prairie. It doesn't take into consideration all the other elements, the flora and fauna, the microclimate, the microflora and fauna that go into making that green healthy. So then the question or the goal becomes, how do we reduce the gray or cover the gray to increase the green? And again, I'm just using green in a generalized sense, but we know that the green has to be more than just a lawn or a boulevard in order to protect those resources. So a lot of, well, not a lot. I think probably every city comprehensive plan has some language in there about will promote or will encourage low impact development, but there's no teeth behind it. It's just, yeah, here's a suggestion. Oh, you don't want to do it? Okay. And then they move on. So a lot of the tools to do this are already there. They exist, but they're just not being implemented. Low impact development. It's been a buzzword since I was in college, and that's really just looking at the plot of land, saying these are key areas to protect, avoiding development of those areas and pushing everything into a smaller area. Maybe increasing the density within that area, but ultimately preserving more land. Conservation design practices is working actual, you know, green space into it. Then there's also the human element of the ecosystem. We can't ignore that we are part of this ecosystem. So building walkable communities, and that walkable community can start to incorporate all of the other things we're looking at, you know, tree preservation, tree establishment, prairie establishment, stormwater management, flood abatement, community resilience, everything else goes with it. We have not yet in this district gone to really pushing green roofs on larger commercial facilities, but that is a practice that's out there that at least softens the gray, moves it towards the green. And then there's, you know, the obvious ones of narrower streets, fewer lanes, fewer parking stalls, building vertically instead of horizontally. And, you know, so, and then taking the existing green we have and either protecting it or expanding it. So looking at the bluff areas, trying to identify critical habitat or critical areas for preservation, transformation of lawn into prairie or woodland areas, and then restoring those degraded natural areas. So what we talked about today were the tools at our disposal. So we are the three-legged stool. We talk about our policy and regulation, our capital projects, and our education and outreach. But in this, we really need to look at the planning part, and I put the planning first, because without a good plan, we're just reacting to everything that's around us. I also talked a bit about unintended consequences of certain things, you know, like sometimes the regulations get in the way of doing something else, and then we need to go into the exceptions. Staff Forbes pointed out earlier today that education outreach is more than just giving information to people. It's changing those attitudes that people have and the perceptions of things. How green is green enough? How much lawn do I need? What should winter treatment look like? So these are the 8 main ideas or components of a healthy ecosystem that came out of the first EHAP TAP, because we don't have enough acronyms. So first was the obvious one: biologically diverse, layered, and connected aquatic, terrestrial, and subterranean habitats. And this is really looking at just saving a wetland without the buffer or anything around it, or saving a small stand of trees and not having it connecting to any flyway or greenway corridor, restoring a portion of a stream but not having it connected to the floodplain. It's more than just preserving an area. It's looking at the whole system. Healthy urban system is resilient to climate change. And this is everything from flooding to the urban island heat effect that we're seeing, or the air quality we've seen of late. Functioning ecosystem services, nutrient cycling, carbon sequestration, food web, etc. Native plants incorporated into the built environment, integrating people into that environment through trails and connections, really connecting people to nature. Ecologically knowledgeable population. It's fairly easy to get out and educate the public through the CAC, through our schools. One thing that we really recognized is how do we reach decision makers, policy makers throughout there? And I think that's where a lot of that education needs to go, which is a lot of why I wanted to bring the community development directors into this, minimizing lawns and using alternative lawns, and then developing spaces that incorporate green infrastructure to mimic natural conditions, or to better yet, to exhibit natural ecosystem functions. So in that, we talked about what are the barriers to it. So we had people just really write on Post-it what the barriers were to it. On the left side are the individual Post-it notes, and we kind of put them into broad categories on the right. And what you'll see is that budget and the human and societal dimensions rise to the top. Lack of a big picture mindset, the lack of funding and staff, and we'll talk about the training. We won't go through this in great detail. We are creating handouts that will go out to the EHAP participants. We'll send those to the managers as well, so you can have this synthesis and on down the list to poor soils or kicking the can down the road. We took these same barriers and put them into policy, human societal dimensions, budget, planning, and ecology. And you can see that education and outreach for policy and the human societal dimension really rises to the top. We're at 73 votes in those 2 categories, as opposed to 50 votes for the next 3 categories. So it really tells us that while we are doing a lot out there and there's a lot of education outreach going on, that there's still a level of, or a lack of understanding or misinformation, or not getting that information to the right people, or just biases that people have that still need to be overcome. So summary of the barriers for you here. Pressure to develop the remaining bits of land. Demand for housing. We've used up the nice 40-acre parcels, quarter sections, and everything that's left now. Not everything, but predominantly what is left are areas that maybe aren't as conducive to development and housing. Regulations and policies, oppositional ordinances, I talked about a little bit. There are many times where we'll sit down with the developer and with the city and we'll say, well, can't you reduce the number of parking stalls, or can't you decrease that setback to the road and therefore save more trees? We'll say, no, the city won't allow us to do that. Or public safety is a big one. No, we need a 41-foot radius cul-de-sac to get the fire truck in. Could you use a hammerhead? No, we can't do that. So things that work, and then inconsistent approaches cross boundaries. You know, what Chanhassen does, Eden Prairie does, Minnetonka does, could be entirely different depending on their priorities. Habitat concerns, fragmentation, invasive species, climate change obviously is a huge one. Resource availability was seen as a barrier. Kind of interesting today when we talked about the things though that were available. We recognize that there is significant funding out there, but it is such a labyrinth to go through and figure out what funding is applicable to what, and when are the deadlines for this one versus that one, and who's the eligible applicant. So really just understanding even how to get that, and then lack of information and research. One of the things I really ran into a lot with the city was that seems like a great idea. Where's the research behind it? You know, that they don't want to do newer, innovative approaches. They really want to see something that's been tried and true, which I can understand why. Then there's the whole apathy or social norms. Again, we live in a suburban world. We want our lawns. We want to go out there and mow them. We want our golf courses, which would fit in the lawn category. And then the government organization. So this is kind of circling back to what I was saying earlier. It's getting those decision makers, policy makers on board, kind of being a top-down approach. You know, you can talk to somebody in the natural resource department, they might be 100% on board with it. The time you go up the ladder, you might not find the same eagerness to participate. So, and then the competing priorities within the organization. You know, we get to focus on water quality. Cities have a number of different things that they have, everything from road maintenance to sanitary sewer to public safety to libraries and schools. And so, you know, there are competing priorities. So, but that is summarizes the barriers. I think that is the last slide. Like I said, in July, we'll be getting back together again. Go back to that. July, we'll be getting back together again to talk about how we can address those gaps or what needs to be done and what would be the most effective and efficient methods for doing that. And then we will talk about how we can work together. As I said, we'll synthesize all of this and I will provide it to the managers in the form of a handout. If you have any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them. Again, we're just in the building the framework for this planning effort. So we don't have many conclusions yet. We don't necessarily know where it's going to go. This is an iterative process. As we identify new things, we want to be able to adapt and incorporate those in.
Do any of the managers have any questions or comments?
President Ziegler, I have a couple of questions.
Manager Pedersen.
Administrator Jeffrey, can you please tell us what the feeling is in the room? You know, are they interested in doing this? Are they excited about it? Or is this, now it's another initiative?
That's a really good question, President Ziegler.
Yes.
Manager Kraft or Manager Pedersen. Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's interesting. Now that when I stop and I pause and think about it, I think there are a few that are in that room just to make sure that they know what's going on. So they're not caught off guard by something the watershed district does in the future. But I would say by and large, the majority of the people in that room are really there because they do want to be involved in being a part of the solution. So I would say the majority are happy to be there. I would look to Engineer Sobiak or Manager Kraft, and they interacted probably a little bit more than I did with people, but that was the feeling I got.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
So I think one of the things that was really inspiring for me today was to watch. So we had staff from the city, so Shorewood and Eden Prairie, Bloomington, I've gotten to know a little bit through this, one of the planners for Bloomington. But the networking that was going on was really incredible. That Bloomington's planner was sharing stuff with Eden Prairie staff. And I mean, it was like they were kind of challenging each other to think outside the box, or helping others think outside the box. And to me, that was one of the big takeaways today was the kind of conversation as they went around the room responding to, projects, policy, regulations, rules, whatever, and looking at what needs to change, kind of, or where there's room for improvement. But that was a huge takeaway for me today. So in answer to your question, Manager Pedersen, I saw a lot of interest and a lot of engagement today.
Okay, one other question.
Manager Patterson.
I'd like to know if we in fact are at the forefront in bringing this and possibly making this a reality.
President Ziegler, managers, I do believe people are thinking about it, but I don't, other than, so the Balzer legislative session that came out of, a lot of funding did go towards habitat protection, habitat preservation, but they don't know what they're going to do with that. In fact, when I was talking to Paul Erdman from Balzer today, that was one of the reasons he really wanted to be there, is because he was excited to see what's happening and see what they could take and do with it. So I would say we are a little bit ahead of the curve on doing this approach to it, which also means we'll get a little more of the heat from people, but that's to be expected.
President Ziegler?
Manager Crafton.
So the one thing that's direction we haven't gone exactly, I was trying to talk to Leslie Etka from Minnetonka, is why this is important in terms of the relationship to climate change and droughts and fires and what we're experiencing this week. And we haven't gotten to that why. And for me, that's an important piece of the educational part, because a lot of what we do on the landscape, we're learning, can cause aridity and drought and that kind of stuff, what we're doing here, because we're affecting that small water cycle. So you're warming the atmosphere and it's causing consequences throughout the country. So, but they're all focused on what they can do at this point. So I think it's still a really good conversation.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
so I have just a couple of comments here. I guess I'm a little unclear as to what the goals are of this process, and if it's, am I correct to say, based on your chart, protecting the water resources? And if that's the case, it seems to me, in the scientific method, you work backwards and you say, what are the threats to the water resources? And then once you have identified the threats to the water resources, you go back and look at, well, how can we eliminate, minimize, those threats? So I'm a little concerned that if you have too broad of an approach to begin with, you can get lost in the weeds, so to speak. And I think it's important to really focus and define the goals, and that may include defining the problems, and then you work yourself, backwards, and doing that. So that's comment number one. Comment number two is that I'm not sure of, well, I assume this process here is get all the players involved, but my question would be, what type of legal regulatory authority do we as a watershed district have to affect any of the possible causes or impacts on our waters, because I think our charter is, it's not as broad as protecting the world from climate change, but a little narrower. So I look at this as maybe, it's nice discussion, but where does it get down to, what are the issues and where's an action plan and who's it going to take in order to implement an action plan? And that's, what I'd like to see. I mean, you can say we don't have the right green spaces, but is that true? Do we have too much gray spaces? I don't know. Is that true? Is that contributing to a problem? If it is, how can that solution? If you're going to try to tell people not to develop, you're probably going to get stiff resistance. I think it's how do they develop smarter, or is the best approach. So I'm glad you're having the discussion and look forward to more coming out on it of this process. But I just want to emphasize that it seems to me we have to start with our major concern, water resources, and work backwards, make sure we're addressing what we're tasked to do, which is, as it says, protect our water resources. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Manager Duval, you've been pretty quiet. Do you have any questions or comments?
I guess just a general comment. I watched a news clip tonight, and it's been in the news the last week or so about how Phoenix has shut down development because of lack of water. And I think this relates a little bit to Manager Cook's comments about identifying the problems and then possibly working backwards to see what some of the solutions might be. And it wasn't a very informative comment on the newscast, but basically it was just unchecked development that's gone on, and they talked about the Phoenix area using more water than New York State or something like that. But I guess the comment is it almost seems like we have to have disasters before we do anything, and short of a disaster, at least from my experience, you have to identify some of the problems, and as Manager Cook said, to work backwards in a systematic way. You have to identify what the problems are. Maybe we have here, I'm not sure, but in any case, that's just an observation. They're running out of water in the Colorado River, and there's too many people that want it, and it's sort of like a food fight.
Okay, Administrator Jaffrey, is there anything else we need to cover on this?
Not at this time. We'll be back to you. Seth Forbes, I'm going to ask you if you recall when I believe it was August, we're going to have a workshop with the Board of Managers specifically on this, getting your input. Do you recall if that was what it was in the schedule?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but August is in my head for whatever reason. September would be the absolute latest.
Okay, unless there's other questions or comments on the update on the Ecosystems Health Action Plan, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay, hearing none. The next item is Education and Outreach Work Plan.
Managers, President Ziegler, managers, Staff Forbes is going to present tonight. Staff Forbes had this work plan to me quite some time ago. The managers have been asking about it, so I asked her to present tonight on her work plan. This is, again, because education outreach is oftentimes reactive to opportunities that present themselves. There isn't necessarily budget items associated with these, aside from the grant, but it's a very detailed work plan, and I've been really, really happy with the work that she's been doing thus far. So with that, I made you co-host staff Forbes. I'll stop sharing and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, everyone can see this okay? President Ziegler, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can. It
Okay.
looks good.
All right, President Ziegler and managers, I'll just do a brief overview. You've been provided with the document of the work plan and also our calendar for the year, which does remain in flux as other opportunities for the present themselves or conditions mean that we need to change dates or reschedule items. So what the ENO work plan, the top items, and you'll see a lot of details for each item on the document that was shared with you, is overall continue to use multiple electronic media for stakeholder outreach. And so this is everything from the website and social media to electronic file sharing. Especially this year, we've been expanding the web pages of our site to be specific to what's going on in the district. For example, you may have seen in the last board packet for the staff report, including a link for a new page specifically tied to the AIS treatments or Eurasian water milfoil, curly leaf pondweed treatments that are going on. Item 2, organize and distribute yearly publications, including the annual communication and the annual report. The annual communication came out fairly recently. That basically is a synopsis of the annual report and does include some additional information, as well as our water body fact sheets, which come out every year. Item 3 in our work plan is use direct mailings to target specific audiences, such as lake treatments and shoreline owners. We have on the to-do list right now is to finalize a postcard that's going to be mailed out to lakeshore property owners to let them know that if they plan to do any work within the shoreline, within the ordinary high water line or the 100-year flood elevation, that they need to contact us to see if they need a permit. Host multiple events to promote the district and its programs and projects. And so that's everything from having our own events as well as attending many of our community events, like such as the City of Eden Prairie, City of Minnetonka. So that's something that we try to, and Eleanor primarily is the one that leads this. So she recently is been planning a workshop with the City of Minnetonka to actually, they're calling it a walk shop, to get people more involved in learn more about soil health. And so the City of Minnetonka, our district and 9 Mile Creek are co-hosting this event to have a guest speaker, which is Dr. Anne Marie as well as get particularly residents of Minnetonka involved in that. Also, representing the district at community events. I can't even think of the number of how many times Eleanor and has been at events on the evenings and weekends, getting out there, getting our materials out there. And then staff attend, other staff attend also, like Josh Maxwell attended with her on a weekend, brought our educational boat, as we call it, to help audiences identify invasive species and gives them hands-on opportunity to try to look for invasive species on a boat. What else? Engage community members through the Citizen Advisory Committee, cost share program, volunteer activities, and other efforts. So that's item 6 on our work plan. And then item 7, support K-12 education through curriculum development. Eleanor's been working a lot on that with St. Hubert. And these are lessons that we can obviously share with other schools within the district. And then also been involved in school events, whether that's an evening science night at the school or a in-classroom presentation to talk about our water resources and how we can protect them, as well as educator mini grants. Item 8, attending conferences. We plan to attend MOD again this year, and well, I guess it's not MOD anymore, but going this year to have a booth again, doing some presentations, as well as the Water Resources Conference in St. Paul. I'm on the docket with Jessica Wilson from the city of Edina to present the Low Salt, No Salt Minnesota program that we worked a lot on earlier this year and are still continue to develop. Item 9, sponsor trainings and workshops with partner organizations. Again, Eleanor is doing primarily this work, so she is working with especially 9 Mile to co-host these workshops, whether it's a smart salting workshop or a lawn care workshop, any of those types of things. And then also thinking about what other workshops can we bring to the district, as well as partner with our communities members. I'm working on right now on developing an idea to have a buckthorn workshop with the city of Eden Prairie. So it's a hands-on workshop that we can offer to people to identify and then learn the best way to control buckthorn in their woodlands. Item 10, develop project communication materials such as fact sheets and signage. And so that comes up with about every initiative that we have. Item 11, participate in regional work groups that align with our district vision and values. 12, facilitate efforts related to our district plans and policies, as well as at the end of the year to compile our annual summary of our outreach events. That's, how much engagement we got on post, how many people attended our workshops or our events. And so that information we include in our annual report, or our section of the annual report. And I also provided to the managers at the end of the E&O plan our calendar, which is always kind of a work in progress, depending on what kind of opportunities arrive. What you're seeing right now is primarily events that have already happened, since we're already in June at this point. Terry just touched on the EHAP workshop. We have our next one coming up in July, and then August we start heavily again with some different events that are happening. Whether it's the educator workshop, Project WET, which is something that is focused on teachers. And so we're co-hosting that with 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, and bringing teachers into a workshop environment so they can get continuing education credits and have hands-on experience with wetland education. Something we haven't scheduled yet, but a volunteer event doing a creek trash pickup, but we may move this to this idea we have for a creek week in the fall. So that is something we're going to do September or October. And some of the activities we have on tap are build your own rain barrel, tree pickup, which is an event that we do yearly, but we want to align it with that, as well as have an open house at the district office. So people can come pick up their trees, interact with us. Even if you aren't picking up trees, we want to encourage people to come see who we are, what we offer, what kind of cost share opportunities people can get involved in. And then also have a passport activity. So this is something that would start before Creek Week and then go through, or even a month after. We haven't set the exact time frame, but this is to encourage people to get out into the district to visit our water resources. And so we have 3 sites selected at each of the 3 creeks, and then 3 other sites selected either to a wetland or a lake, to again get people out there. Scan a QR code is the idea right now. They collect a passphrase, and then they can use that to complete their passport. And then once they turn their passport in, they get a prize. And we're certainly going to make this as approachable as possible. We were thinking about, okay, if someone has a bunch of kids, or sorry, little kids, and they can't get to the sites, which we're making the sites very accessible. But if you just don't have the time or effort, if people can even get to one site and get the QR code, then they're still going to get like a sticker or something. So again, we're working on those details right now. Again, Cycle the Creek is on the agenda for this year. We'll probably bookend that around Creek Week. It just makes sense. And then, like I mentioned before, in October is a really busy month. October, the Buckthorn workshop with the city of in cooperation with the city of Eden Prairie, because they've got the land. They have, of course, plenty of sites that have buckthorn that we can take advantage of to do hands-on experience. And also what I mentioned earlier, the soil health workshop, which is in partnership with the city of Minnetonka and 9 Mile Creek. Smart salting for property management. We'll do a project tour again like we did last year. Also, The Preserve Association is a community partner that we've worked a lot with in our cost share program, and they've done a lot of conversion of that not so great green space or lawn to improved green space like prairies and wetland restorations. So that is one thing that we'd like to get people out at and have a look at. It's a great site to do a walking tour. So as long as the weather aligns with us, it should be a fantastic walk outside. I also mentioned the Water Resources Conference. I plan to, assuming that our abstract is accepted, to partner with the city of Eden, the city of Edina, Jessica Wilson, to present there at the Water Resources Conference. And then other outreach events, and then wrapping up the year with the MOD conference, and again, doing a booth this year, as well as doing a presentation and at least one presentation on low salt, no salt, and we're discussing what else we want to do there. So what are we going on right now at the district? Well, we've got the photo contest. So if you haven't submitted your photos yet, please do. These are photos that are considered for the calendar, which comes out next year, which represents our annual communication. Lake treatment notifications are going on now. So if you visit our AIS control webpage, you'll see what lakes are going to get treated this year. And this is a new webpage that we've shared with our city partners. So when they get calls, or if they're curious about what the district is doing as far as lake activities or lake treatment activities, they can check that out. They get questions from residents. I can send this link to, or have been sending this link to our association contacts at different lake associations. So they're aware of it and they can share information. And then also in conjunction with that, working on an e-blast that we can send out that people can sign up for, just in the testing phase right now. So it's not active, but I developed the prototype, and people will be able to sign up for a specific lake and get notifications about that lake, whether there's a curly leaf pondweed notification coming up or something else that the district is doing with that lake. Events and trainings, if you're interested in seeing what's coming up there, you can check out our webpage. Our CAC next meeting is next Monday, so encourage everyone to attend. We're going to have the professor who directs the Forest Ecology Center of the university there to speak. That's Dr. Lee Freilich. And then various public events you can find at our calendar on our webpage. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take any questions that anyone has.
Do any of the managers have questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I have several comments. First of all, thank you for making a presentation to us on E&O. I'm one of those who have been bugging about finding out what is the plan before we go approve a budget. So I really appreciate having had this presentation and having an idea of what hasn't been done, what's being planned. And on that note, I'd like to make sure that I'd like to have a forward-looking plan for the budget cycle coming up. In other words, a 2024 plan about what's going to be done. One thing I've mentioned, I think, to Administrator Jeffrey a few times is mentioned about sending out the postcard, et cetera, about the treatment, but we need to figure out a way to get the word out about permitting requirements. And, several things about that is try to get the cities to make sure that they have some type of notification people apply for permits generally. And that, wondering if maybe that can be the subject of the review of their plan renewal going forward. I point that out. But the other, each of the communities, or at least I know Chanhassen does, puts out generally a quarterly magazine, newsletter. I don't know what you call it, but it seems to me this is a great opportunity for us to get articles, et cetera, out to the public, notices of permits, et cetera. I don't know if it costs us to contribute to it, but I think it would be worthwhile. I know it's a publication that our whole family pores over because it has notices of events, requirements, kids and adult activities, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's it presents a great opportunity for getting the word out about the district, et cetera. You mentioned about doing projects. I can't help but mention that Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are big on projects for them to earn various badges and advances. And I would encourage you to consider contacting local troops and groups and getting them to participate along with their parents and siblings, et cetera. That would be a good way to get people involved. Also, you know, there's Habitat. I was involved in Habitat for a number of years. I don't know if there's a for ecological aspect of the Habitat projects, you know, in our area that we could contribute to, whether it be a rain garden or something else like that. You know, I don't know, but that's, you know, that's a possibility. But and the last thing I noticed that you mentioned that be sending out notice and postcards to lakeshore owners about the requirements for permits, et cetera. I have to personally say that is way past due. I just sent a email to Administrator Jeffrey this afternoon about property 3 doors down from myself, where it looks like they're stripping the entire backyard, which is probably well over 5,000 square feet. And I don't know whether, you know, certainly the homeowners probably don't know about it or they're ignoring it, but somehow get the word out to contractors, some way, shape, or form. I know the state of Minnesota has a list of all licensed contractors. It's not very expensive to get. I think that's, you know, that's well worth it. And that we should really emphasize education and outreach for the purposes of those permits. And I'm glad you mentioned about possibility of having some events. I think would be great. And the one that just crossed my mind is with respect to permits and requirements, whether or not we should have an event just for real estate agents, so that they know the lay of the land and they can advise their clients, because they have certain obligations if they know about certain requirements to disclose those. So I just throw out those as ideas, but thank you again very, very much for this presentation. I really appreciate the effort going into it, and I look forward to a projected one for 2024. I'm finished. Thank you.
Do any other managers have questions, comments?
President Ziegler.
Manager Patterson.
So first I'd like to say that I think that the prior E&O plan somehow left and got lost. And so Liz and Administrator Jeffrey have had to, and Eleanor, have had to start all over from scratch. And so this document and how they're developing E&O for us, it's really kind of coming out of all of their work. So I would like to express my appreciation for having to start from nothing and making this into a direction in which we're actually moving forward. So first, I'd like to say thank you about that. Secondly, I don't think that we have enough of a presence in our local community newspapers. I've seen that a lot from Minnehaha Creek and some from 9 Mile. And so I really like to encourage the education staff to maybe kind of come up on a quarterly basis to try to submit something into either of those papers, because anything that we can get in with that's got our name on it, that recognizes what a watershed district is going to help us in the long run. So I'd like to see a little more of that. And as Manager Cook said, I know all of the cities also have some sort of newsletter form. I know Shorewood's got one a month. I know Chanhassen has one. I know Eden Prairie's got one. So whatever we can do to meet those people that put that communication topic together, where they know they can reach out to us, we can supply them with some good ideas. Here's a great article on whatever, I think would be terrifically helpful. I think she also had on the list the community fair option. I know that most of the cities have some sort of community, mostly usually in the spring. Eden Prairie has one, City of Shorewood has one. I'd like to make sure that we have tables at those events so people can come up, get information about the watershed. We're part of that community. We try to reach out to them, as well as continue to reach out to the lake associations, because many of them have their own newsletters. And if we could kind of get into providing them with the actual scientific evidence and have them use that in their newsletter, I think it would be very helpful for all the residents that live on the lakes as well. So anyway, thank you very much. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Do any of the other managers have anything?
Mr. President,
Manager Duval?
I guess I would just chime in on the two previous comments, and it seems like there's a lot of action going on here, and that's good. But I think I've signed up for many different newsletters with Hennepin County and with the city. And so I'm getting newsletters all the time on different programs. So it seems like well, for instance, the city of Minnetonka, they send out a hard copy newsletter once a month, and it's filled with all kinds of activities. We should figure out a way to be part of that newsletter, the hard copy, but even the electronic version of it. I mean, it has all kinds of different activities, and this would fit right in. And then the same with Hennepin County, and I don't know about Carver County, but I get all kinds of different things from Hennepin County online. And we should be connected with that as well, wherever we can. And the item that Manager Cook mentioned about real estate agents, was Manager Cook mentioned the real estate agents. So I worked in the Minnetonka office for about 10 years, and the offices are always looking for speakers to come in, and the speaker doesn't have to be a big presentation, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and have brochures. And the real estate agents, so the offices want to have you in there, and Liz could go in there and others. And then, but the agents like it themselves, because it becomes a additional point when they're talking to their clients, to talk about how the water is being used and managed, and it's an additive feature, I think, in terms of selling houses. So I think it's something that would be well received in real estate offices. I don't know exactly what you put together, but if you talk to the manager of the office, they'll typically give you a time slot, and it's like on a Tuesday morning, and they'll have like an hour meeting, and maybe you'd have a 10 or 10-minute spot to talk about the watershed. And so I'm sure you could get into local offices around the area here. Anyway, that's all. Great job. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Let me echo that again. Great job. Thanks for presenting.
Thank you. And President Ziegler,
Yes.
I follow up on just a couple of quick things, something I forgot to mention, but Manager, I think it was Manager Cook, mentioned the permitting stuff. I have been meeting with, actually I met with the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, and I'll share this real quick with you. This is a draft, it's in process, but we had a discussion on how can we help cities direct their residents to information about a watershed district. And so that first step, again, primarily with the thought of permits in mind, because I met specifically with the permitting staff at 9 Mile Creek. And so I'll share this again. It's not live, not available on a website, but this is a web page that I put together. It's very simple. So basically, from we are not the watershed organization for everybody in Eden Prairie, or everybody in Bloomington, or everybody in Minnetonka. So how can we, as a watershed, get people to direct to us. And so this is a link that we would like to offer to cities. And I've already talked to a couple of city people like, oh yeah, this would be great. This would be really useful to have. They can include this link on their website. They can include it on any kind of electronic materials that they send out. But basically it's letting people know if you're in the southwest part of the metro, you are own property or a resident or have a business with one of these 6 watershed districts. And so you can click the link to go directly to the watershed district. And then there's an interactive map. Right now, this is the placeholder map I have on. This is the map that people can find out if they live in our district. But I do have a map this is a draft of a map that would be in place of that placeholder that I have right now. And so basically these are all the watershed districts that are listed on this page. So pulled out, but you can enter your address on here. I mean, you can enter your address in ours and find out what watershed your district is on, but we're thinking of a broader audience here. So say someone from the city of Eden Prairie, they don't know what watershed district they live in. They could click on this and then enter and find out. So just for example, I'm just going to put in our district office. Lake Drive East, whoops, Chanhassen, and it will zoom in and it just tells you what watershed district you're in. So it's very clean, very simple. So again, we're using this for offering this to cities that have other watershed districts within them in the Southwest Metro. And then from there, you could click on here and then this will direct you to our website. If you're in 9 Mile, same thing. You can click and it'll tell you we're in watershed. I'm going to clear the search location. I could say, oh yeah, if I'm not good at entering address, oh, right there. I own this business here. What watershed district am I in? I'm in 9 Mile Creek watershed district. And so you can click there and go directly to that watershed district. The part of this that also is very flexible is I can add a list here specifically for us or for another watershed district is directly to the permits page or directly to their events page or whatever. So again, this is something we want to offer to cities to help them really to ultimately help their property owners to know where to find us. And I want to highlight more on here. Again, this is a draft. This is not live, but highlight, okay, permit activities and such. But this is just something that that's in process right now. Also as well, several managers mentioned the newsletters, and having worked with a city for a number of years, I know it's really competitive getting items in city newsletters. But I've been talking with Lori Hack from the city of Eden Prairie. I have a meeting pending with Joe Seidel with the city of Chanhassen to discuss how can we help you, and then also get ourselves known and get information out there, whether that's helping them meet their MS4 requirements, whatever that is, helping people understand if they live within our watershed boundary, what they need to do. So I have began those conversations. I'm hoping to meet soon with the city of Chanhassen in particular, with their communications person, as well as Joe, who is their water resources engineer. So those conversations have begun, and so it is moving. So it's fantastic though to get some additional ideas. I really like the idea, and this is something we've talked about before, is having a continuing education opportunity for realtors. But I particularly like the going to the offices too, and getting realtors that way too, and developing a packet for them to help people that they can offer then to their clients to say, you know, this is what a watershed is. If you're buying a house in this watershed, particularly, you know, for us, if you're buying a property in our watershed district, this is what you need to know, and this is what we offer you, and this is, you know, how you can reach us. So just a little bit of follow up there. But thank you for your suggestions, and I appreciate it. And certainly, I'm always available. If you have an idea, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from any of the managers?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I just want to say I'm very impressed with the work in progress on the map. I think it's a great concept. I guess including a bunch of cities and a bunch of watershed districts raises questions in my mind, but who's doing what? If it's a collaborative effort, I think it's a good start. You know, the question is how do you get out the fact that this map exists? Because that's kind of, in my view, that's somewhat the problem we have with everything is how do you get the initial information to the people that need the information? How do you get it to them? And it seems to me best shot is through the other publications. My final comment was, I think everybody responds to the possibility of money. So maybe grants, etc., might be a way to get people's attention. I don't know. I just throw that out. Many people like free money, so I'll end at that. Thank you.
President Ziegler, can I say just one more thing?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if any of you are live in the city of Eden Prairie, but the Eden Prairie Community Guide that just went out. If you open that, you open the first page on page 3, we purchased a full page spread in that. And so it is a map of our watershed district and aligning with the city of Eden Prairie. And the 3 things listed on there are permits, education outreach, permits, grant money, and education that you can learn about. So we are making an effort. I'm hoping that certainly sends us more people our way. It has our website, direct website, as well as our website /map, which will bring people to hope they can find out, get them curious and see if they live within our watershed district. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank
So,
you.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
just one follow-up, and that's terrific getting out there. And hopefully we get every city, to be able to do a similar thing for each one of these cities, because I think it's an important thing and a great way to get the word out. And the one thing I wanted to mention, not directly on point, but I would like to see in our board packet things like a copy of what you just mentioned is going to show up in the Eden Prairie, or other things that you're doing so that we're aware of what's happening. And I know when a lot of companies, but also a lot of other government agencies just have a info pack with just information or items of interest so that managers or whoever they meet, commissioners, know what's going on or what's being done, by staff in the district. So I throw that out as something to consider for our board packages going forward. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll show this to you real quick. This was mentioned in the last staff report. It didn't have a link to it because we don't have a live link to it, but this is the full page ad. What's your watershed? Engaging people, showing the overlap of the boundary, and then what can we do for you, basically? Permits, volunteer opportunities, education, money. So just want to show you that because I forgot I had that a printout for me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the education and outreach work plan that we need to talk about before we move on? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is the audit report.
President Ziegler, managers, I'm hoping that the Audit and Finance Committee will help me out. Justin Nilsson and Andrew Berg both had other obligations this evening and were unable to attend. Justin did meet with the Audit and Finance Committee last week, or excuse me, on Tuesday of this week, and went through this presentation that I'm going to share with you. Just a reminder, it's an independent audit. It is due at the end of this month. But I'll do my best to share what Justin shared with the Audit and Finance Committee. So the audit results, and then implementation fund results. What's in this? So auditor's opinion, we did get an unmodified, clean opinion, which is what we're striving for. So that is good. The next thing, though, we did have one finding, and I'll go through that next. And that finding was timely payment of claims. I think it was 7 that they pulled. What we were finding, so we talked to the individual, so it wasn't Justin, it was another individual there about those claims. And we said, well, our contract now says 45 days. And he said, yes, but state law says 35 days. So even though we had changed the contract language, they still considered it to be a non-timely payment. So that was the findings there. Otherwise, they just recommended that we continue doing our same things, stamping when they come in, just having it, chain of custody to make sure that we know when they're there. Fund balance and 509 implementation, budget and fund balances remain relatively consistent throughout. Felt that was overall good. He didn't really comment any more on this. Manager Developer Crafton, you have anything to add? Please just jump in. And then implementation fund, the actual budget. And what we had here, a lot of the variance is due to either projects that were, well, not either, primarily due to projects that were programmed to be done this year that are not going to be done until future years. So that's the reason for the variance in the budget for projects, which is definitely our single largest variance. And then we do have outstanding grant payments to be made yet. Those will come in this year. The Bowser grant, St. Hubert's funding, and then some stormwater pond grants as well are out there. I think. So this is one that the Audit Finance Committee has been talking about. We're the next Audit Finance Committee meeting. Corey Boyer from 4M is going to be in to talk to us about investment options, about the diversification that we currently have, and whether or not we're comfortable with it. But our balances remained relatively consistent over the last 3 years, and overall in good shape. I have nothing else at this time. I know that there was several other questions we had of Mr. Nelson at that meeting, but let's wait and hear what managers have to say, and hopefully we can respond to those as best possible.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
So one of the things I brought up or we talked about was the unearned revenue and deferred revenue. And basically what it kind of boiled down to in terms of what how Justin explained it to us is it's kind of like the recognition of the money that we receive when it comes in. And Bowser fronts money to the watershed district for a project or with a grant, but we haven't done the work yet. And so you don't, under accrual, you don't recognize it until it's been earned. And then there was some discussion too about how they've changed some of the language about that. So they don't use unearned or deferred revenue anymore. They actually use unearned. So we've suggested that we'll talk. We're going to meet with our accountant next time. She was unfortunately, she wasn't able to make that meeting. So but get those merged so that those things are all there. But it it explains some of why that is, and basically it's just Bowser's policies that are driving some of that.
Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
So one, I have a number of comments. First of all, I've spent a considerable amount of time making some suggestions to the change in the proposed draft of the MD&A, for example. I've never received a response, and I never but specific response is one thing, but more importantly, a red line showing what, if any, changes were made to the original draft that was circulated. At least I have no recollection of receiving one, and if I did, I apologize. But it seems to me the least that could be done is that we would be getting back a red line showing any changes to a prior draft, to the MD&A, et cetera, from the original meeting. I'm sorry to say this, but I do work for a lot of big companies who are all audited, and their accountants are usually the big three. I think it's down to three now, et cetera. And you always get that type of response as to, well, we made these changes, and usually at least addressing what changes weren't made. I will note I got some type of perfunctory, I'll use that adjective, response. I believe it was from Justin. I believe they probably were addressed towards some of my comments. But in continuation of that, for nobody at Abdo to be able to show up and answer questions today is a problem created by somebody that should never be repeated. And if we should be doing scheduling far enough in advance so that all the players can be available to answer the appropriate questions. I mean, I still have significant questions about our reports, and I'll recall when I was talking about the 2021 audit systems, and when I was talking to Andy Berg, in general, he didn't have any problem with most of the suggestions because they had to do with making sure that the public knew what we were talking about. And I just have concerns about the people who are working on our account. And I think we need to look into different auditors going forward. If you can't at least send a red line of any changes or address people's specific concerns or questions with something other than a truncated response, then to me, they're of no value to us. And we should be looking, at somebody else. And like I said, I don't know what the results were. To me, there's two big things out there that I don't know if they're addressed or not addressed. It's amount due to Eden Prairie over a period of time, and the amount due from St. Hubert's over a period of time. I don't know if they're included in payables, receivables. I asked that question, I believe, at the our last Board of Managers meeting. I would hope that the Audit and Finance Committee or Accounting and Finance Committee look into that and discuss this where accountants and the auditors, because the bottom line of financial statements, so I understand it, is to provide understandable information to the users of that report, which in this case is not only us managers, but the public at large. And my last comment was, unfortunately, a lot of the suggested changes I made to the MD&A language was because some of the language is just not understandable or poorly drafted, poorly crafted. And so I just have to reiterate, I am very disappointed in the services that we are getting out of Abdo with regard to our account. So that's the end of my comment. Oh, but one last one. I didn't see that the legal questionnaire required by the state auditor was circulated. And at least I didn't see a copy. To me, I can't understand how an auditing firm can respond to the state auditor with regard to the questionnaire when they haven't done an adequate job of circulating the questionnaire to the people who may well know if there are issues. And above all, no disrespect to the staff at all, but it is us managers who are management. And we're responsible ultimately for complying with the law and providing understandable audit to the financial statements. So So that's it. This is not the first time I made most of these comments.
Okay, do any other managers have questions or comments on the audit report?
Mr. President.
Manager Duval.
So one of the things that did come up in the short meeting with him was the notion of the difficulty of dealing with any financial information with the way the kinds of projects and things that we do. It's difficult to look at our funding sources that come in lumps and over multiple time periods. We have projects that start and stop and they're over multiple time periods. So it's always difficult to characterize those in the standard format that one might want to see in a financial statement. And then on top of that, we have 2 or 3 different formats that are discussed in the audit report, again, that are not that easy to follow from, in my opinion, just in general. They're going through a standardized format for governmental unit. And we have monthly statements that are on a completely different format. So I think it's difficult. It's difficult at best to figure out kind of how all these things reconcile. And I know they do it, and I know as an accountant in the past, the terminology of accountants is really obtuse at best. And many times it's not understood by even accountants. So I'm not saying it in support of what they do or how they do it. I'm just getting to interact with them just on a very slight basis. But he did make the comment about the difficulty, and I think even in the summary numbers, it shows we have a budget of or revenues of $7 million or something like that. Well, we didn't get $7 million in this year, or last year. We got the monies in over a number of years, and they're there until we actually spend the money. So that makes it difficult to, I think, to understand sometimes why the budgets and the numbers don't match up. And there's not enough paper and not enough explanation to go through the various reconciliation processes, in my opinion. So that's just something we have to live with, and hopefully we can get our monthly statements to a format that is more easily readable than it currently is. And anyway, that's my comment.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
The other comment I guess I wanted to make is, so the audit is done for Bowser and to be sent on to the whatever government that they have to report to. For us, it's basically just information as to our, how we're doing, whether we're being consistent, and their sampling shows that we're being reasonable in what we're doing. But we really don't get to comment because it's an independent audit, and it's informational for us, but we don't have the capacity to comment on it. It's done for Bowser pretty much. So I just wanted to get that on everybody's radar. I think Administrator Jeffrey may have referenced that before, explained that, but good to get it out there again.
Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
Well, quite frankly, the actual, whether it be the balance sheet or whatever her name is for the income statement, et cetera, those are all numbers that are computed, based upon generally accepted government accounting principles. The MD&A is not. That is our discussion. That is to be our explanation of what happened. You know, so it's not the up to the auditors to prepare the MD&A. It's not their work. MD&A is our work, our statement. And that's the place where we should be describing in understandable language what happened during the year on a financial basis, so that it makes some of the accounting statements make sense. And unfortunately, why the government decided, or the government accounting principles decided to call it different things than what's done under GAAP, I have no idea. That's a mistake. But the other thing is that is why you have footnotes, and you're allowed footnotes. Footnotes are the place to explain things. Okay, and like I said, I mean, I've spent 45 years looking at audited financial statements, and the footnotes really are where you get the meat of what's going on with, you know, the company and its financial statements. So I think we're passing the buck in trying to say that it's Bowser, because it's not. They may go to Bowser, it goes to the state auditor, but it's the generally accepted government accounting principles that apply, and the MDA is supposed to be our discussion of the financial performance of the district for the prior year. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, so unless there's other questions or comments, the next item on the agenda is the capital project fund balance report.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
it's Mike Welch. I just briefly on the audit, I will follow up with Terry tomorrow. I just saw that finding in preparing for the meeting tonight. I'll follow up with Terry to make sure the communication with the auditor is clear. The statutory provision that the district has hewed to closely with contracting, it allows for the district contracting terms to set 45 days. So why they would make a finding based on 35, because that's just the default, is an incorrect reading of the statute. And I'll follow up with Terry to make sure that we got apples with apples and oranges with oranges. It may be that some of those are from contracts before we implemented that practice, but we've been doing it for about 2 years now, so I'd be a little surprised, but Terry and I will look at the details tomorrow.
thank you.
All right, managers. What I really want to do tonight is, so in July, we're going to come back to you with a draft budget. We have been tweaking with the way this budget is presented. So I want to just kind of hone in on one specific project, look at what we're putting in for information, and get your feedback on, well, we'd like a little more, we'd like it not to be. So what I'd like to look at is this project that I'm expanding right now, which is Upper Riley Creek stabilization. So we'll have it for all of these. And now I'm going to go to that individual one. So I'm going to get out of here. We can come back, but I just wanted to note that we're carrying out the levy through future years, and it would allow us to look at this. But all of this doesn't fit onto my next slide. But okay, so but in order to make it clearer for me, at least, I'd like to just kind of hone in on one specific project. So in table 1 will be this format. And what we want to start doing, so if you expand that column to the side here, it'll break out the individual components of that project. So you've got your in this one case, you've got the actual drafting of the plan, the design, other ones you might have feasibility design, permitting, but things that are specific to the project. So we can start looking at where is our money being spent on individual projects. Okay. So going back over to just the simplified version of it. So what we would do is we would put in here, so we'd start with what our adopted budget is at the beginning of the year. or at December the preceding year. And then any revisions we make to that budget, and that's one of the things the Audit and Finance Committee is talking about is, do we want to do a quarterly report, a biannual report? How do we want to come back and look at, evaluate where we are in the project as we may move through it? So what we had always done in the past was really just a straight line projection of what we thought we would have at the end of the year. And that's where sometimes we would get off. And I believe Manager Cook, that was one of the things that you've been pointing out is, look, what do we really have at the end of the year so that when we start our budget the following year? So we've added the column of what is our actual end of year remaining. And that would then move into the carryover budget. The reason this is different, 3,000 less, we did have one more $3,000 expense after this went out for maintenance of it. Oh, actually for plan of it. Then with this, so now all of this is going to tie to, go over to this again. So if we were to look into this, each of these projects will have its own tab. So if we go to tab for this, Upper Riley. And in here, we can update these numbers annually and they tie back into that other table. We believe we're going to need an additional table to be able to compare proposed and what's been spent. But we'll know what we are levying each year. So initially it's going to be, we'll know the year we levy it, what it is, and then we'll project out for following years. But based on expenses, we'll be able to adjust that. So once we know it, we'll go back, we'll update those numbers so they accurately reflect what it is. And then this number, then these numbers will populate table 1. So they'll always be referencing this. I know that this is a fair amount to digest right now, but I can make this, you have seen this table, something very similar in December, but with updated numbers, but Engineer Sobiak and myself, Staff Bach have been working on populating it. And the reason I picked Upper Riley is it's a project we're starting now. We know where we're at with it. We know where, we don't have to try and guess what happened in 2017. So this is what we want to be able to present to the board for one, our budget, and 2, for quarterly or biannual reports of where are we at in this project budget? Where has the money been spent on it? That's really all I want to do. In July, we'll come back with this actually populated fully for what we are proposing the managers adopt as a budget. All I really want to know, are there items that you really want to see in there? Do you think we're capturing what you want? I mean, what I heard overall is always, we need to tie the project back to that table. We need to be able to go and see where we're at. And it's not enough just to have one line. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
This is excellent. I mean, this is terrific. This is, I can't tell you how many orders of magnitude better this is than what we've had in the past, and understandably complex, but thank you for tackling the complexity of this so we have a better handle on what we plan to spend each year. My only part, I have the other copy up there looking at it. It's a little hard to see it on the screen, but my one comment was to make, and I think you're breaking down your detail where you jump to a tab for a particular project, can show us what we plan to be spending in future years. My one point would be, is I think we've kind of in the past, what's a good word for it? Allocated an amount of money from prior levies for this project, but we wouldn't use it all in a particular year. And if you could devise a way that we can have it understandable that this year on this project, we're spending, say, 1 million out of we've accumulated 3 million and somehow show that we've got 2 million and it's earmarked today for this project, we always have the option to change that. But I think that might be helpful. You know, but until I see this in detail. So that was my one thought, where we've accumulated money specifically for a project. Again, not that we can't change it, somehow be able to reflect that. And I think you can, because you go through multiple years, I believe, on your tabs. So I think you can show, you know, maybe you can show, well, this is how much we have accumulated to date. This is how much we're going to spend. This will be how much our carryover will be. And I think that will help us in our budgeting, that we'll be able to focus on this year's numbers, you know, and make a distinction between what we've accumulated and what we're going to spend in future years, because this project is a multi-year project. So I just throw that out as something to look at. Maybe you've already addressed it. I just can't see it.
President Ziegler,
Yes.
Manager Cook, you actually did a much better job of explaining what that other table we thought we would have to include is than my rambling on. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, and Engineer Sobiak and I have discussed that, and we will have something there for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do any other managers have questions or comments on this report? We're going to be seeing more shortly, so, okay. Any other comments or things that we need to talk about before, I guess the next item is adjourned?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
unless somebody has something else to bring up, I move that we adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I saw Manager Pedersen mouth. I said.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments before we vote? Administrator Jeffrey, can you take us through a roll call vote, please?
Absolutely, President Ziegler. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
sorry. Manager DeVell,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
5-0, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy.
Breathe.
Good night, all.